Welcome to Hauntedhour podcast. This episode, I sit down with Dr. Kris Sumner and we discuss history and its impact on paranormal investigations, tours, and the locations. It's an informative and fun conversation I think everyone should hear. In 2021, Dr. Sumner coupled her passion for history and travel when she co-founded History, Highways, and Haunts LLC. So let's get right into this week's episode. I'm excited to have you on because I really want to cover like history and the paranormal and just history in general and like these locations that like people come in and they take little tours and I feel like they don't understand how important it is to like know the history for lots of reasons. Just, the heritage of, the past. And like even when you like move into a house, don't you want to know the history of who lived there and what their lives were like? And I find generally speaking, people don't until we get to a certain age. All of a sudden it becomes important.
No, you're absolutely right, and that's why when we opened the jail here in Scott County, the history is absolutely the driving part of what we do. Our Facebook page, our website, all of our marketing material. If you were to look at it and not be looking for paranormal, you would just think, oh, a historic location that offers tours. And so even though the paranormal is what pays our bills, the history was extremely important to us. Getting it right, getting the stories right, talking to locals about, what the jail means to them, talking to people who have spent time in here, talking to former jailers, former deputies, former inmates. And so, for us, we really do think it's important. And to your point, I do think it's an area that is lacking in the generation that is maybe one or two behind us. I think that they're so immersed in, this, or self-absorbed really in this social media age, that they're just not as receptive to the historical content as somebody in our generation.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. And I also feel like people don't like the history. And so they kind of want to like, delete it or rewrite it. And it's like, but I still go with the old, if you don't look back at ancient civilization, you don't learn, you won't know. Like you go like, 5 more generations. And if they've erased stuff, there's no one to tell those stories. No one's going to know what happened. And then you're just going to keep doing things over and over again. Because I'm one of those people that believe that at some point, something's going to happen and we're not going to have the internet or not like it is now. And so all these photos that we've taken, all the documents we've written, everything that's, been shredded and it's only online, all that's going to be gone. And so that kind of makes me think, like my dad's really into the history of our family and stuff, but a school that he went to had burnt down. And so there was something that stopped him being able to do any more searching because of that. So have you ever found a location that you're researching its history and you get to a dead end and there's just nothing to find out?
Yes, there are locations that it is very tough, especially places that are lesser known, like for example, the Monticello Opera House in Florida. We did an investigation there. I haven't really released the video yet, just because one, I've been very busy, and two, we want to give a very robust history of the locations that we visit, and it is, there's some information, but it is one of those locations that I have to struggle to find information for. I love doing research on locations that have a very storied past, but come at it from a way that most people may not know about. So, for example, the USS North Carolina in Wilmington, North Carolina. This is an amazing battleship, and most people generally know the history. But when you really start delving down into it, not just the battle perspective of what the ship went through, but how, it languished for 16 years after the war, and how it was going to be scrapped for metal, and how the citizens of North Carolina really rallied to get this ship saved. And so to be able to delve down further into those historical stories is what's fascinating to me. And so I really do try to dig deep to find some of that history that may not be as prevalent as some of the overarching stories that are out there.
Yeah, I love that because there's people who like played a huge role, like you said, in this, and people might not even know what their names are. The
Mhm.
story's not told outside their family. I love that because I feel like that is, and you hear the same story over and over again. There's nothing new to explore, and then it just doesn't become interesting once everybody knows. So to like be able to get like these little side, stories and events and real people that were doing stuff, and I
Mhm.
mean, I haven't heard that yet, so that's really interesting.
Yeah,
So then
and
that makes go ahead.
no, and like I said, that's what I really love to find and to put out there, for our audience.
Yeah. So now lately, I feel like everything I've been watching is talking about how according to, TV, all ancient civilizations have some kind of, alien contact, history.
Mhm.
And so that leads me to ask you if think that that's, somewhat true. And then also, is there anything like in American history where they talk about contact with extraterrestrials?
I definitely think it's a possibility. When you look back at some of the ancient structures that are out there, the pyramids in Egypt, right? Massive undertakings, and not to say that that alien life isn't possible, but it really opens the idea that something else maybe had a hand in that, right? And so I think it's possible that different civilizations had contact, and maybe, for lack of a better term, got some things kickstarted, right? That we still notice today. Like I said, the pyramids, some of the ancient structures down in Mexico and South America, some things that were just a feat of engineering that you would think would not be possible with the intelligent level or the tools or the resources that they had back in that time.
Right.
And so that's what leads me to believe, because all things are possible. So that's what leads me to believe that it absolutely is possible. And from just an overarching perspective, the idea that we're the only beings in this vast universe, to me, is so self-centered, and
Yeah.
it's such a small mindset, or viewpoint, because why is all this other out there, right?
Yeah.
When you're watching shows about space and they're calculating, galaxies, that are so numerous that your mind can't even process.
Yeah.
And so to think that we're the only people out here, the only intelligent beings, that to me is a little bit mind-boggling. Obviously some people will say, well, how do you have that view and also be a Christian? I don't think there has to be one or the other. I think that it was set in motion by God, who created us, and he could create all other universes. So to think that we're the only people, and that they have not had contact with us, to me, I think is a kind of a narrow mindset.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, a lot of the shows bring up that even in different religions, they all seem to have somebody who came from the sky
Hmm.
and gives them some sort of knowledge.
Hmm.
And so I know with Christianity, there's one God, but like with, a lot of, I mean, that doesn't mean that they weren't like angels or messengers or whatever, like you look at it a lot of different ways.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so I feel like even like people with like dreams and messages and all that type of stuff, it's like you get these messages, you see the future. Some people like hear, messages. And I feel like at this point, it's possible that we're getting it from, other living beings that are
Hmm.
somewhere else and they're able to communicate with us because on some level we must be attached to them
Hmm.
in some way.
Right.
And so then I always had this theory going on that I believed that shadow figures could possibly be people dreaming. So Have you guys had any shadow figures in the jail?
We have. Yeah, we have. I
Oh,
mean, I've seen him a couple of times here. We've actually captured one, or a guest of ours actually captured one during a guided ghost hunt. And it is a picture that we share with the tours that come in here. So yeah, we have seen shadow figures. Mhm.
oh. So what is your theory on what they are?
For me personally, I do think that it's energy that can be manifested. I associate with what we have here in the jail with one of our former sheriffs that was killed right outside the front door in 1925. It's still an unsolved murder as to who killed him. And the shadow figure that we've seen typically comes out or manifests when we're talking about him,
Oh,
or in an area that we feel he's very prevalent. And so that's why we've kind of associated it with him. Also, he was 6'8", and so very tall guy for 1925 standards, but for any
yeah,
standards.
yeah.
And the shadow figure that we see here is extremely tall. Like our door
Oh,
frames are obviously 7 foot standard door
yeah,
frames, and so every time we see him, he's right below the top of that door frame. So again, those are just some of the things that we feel are associated with him, and that's why we
yeah.
think it's him.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. So
Mhm,
then it's still an unsolved mystery,
mhm.
and like you're into digging into history. So like, are you looking into that? And how can you? Because how what year was that happened?
It was
1925.
1925, right? And so we have delved into the historical archives. We've delved into newspapers from newspapers.com, and there's a lot of information about the event itself. A lot of speculation. He was a sheriff who ran on the stance of getting rid of moonshine, and here in rural Tennessee,
Mm,
you didn't do that in the 1920s,
yeah,
right? Because that was that
yeah,
was people's livelihood.
yeah.
So he was actually warned not to go after the moonshiners, but he didn't listen. He's vowed to make Scott County as dry as the Sahara Desert, and
Oh,
so he was actually bringing in a moonshiner that he had arrested in August of 1925, and some people ran around the building and shot and killed him and then took off. So there was speculation as to who killed him, but nobody was ever held, and no charges were ever brought against anybody in relation to that crime. So we think that he's here. For a couple of reasons. One, because he was the sheriff, that he really cared about this jail, and really just to kind of see what we're doing and how we're keeping it up.
yeah, yeah. I can see that. Oh my gosh. Um, So I was watching some videos on, and I'll put the links below, but I was watching some videos on the YouTube for the
Mhm.
jail. And there's people who have, there was one where they heard, I guess two guys were doing like an EVP session. Maybe they were sitting down at the stairs, and it was actually made me laugh out loud because um, they're talking, everything's fine, and then all of a sudden you hear somebody, sounds like somebody's running up the stairs, and I've never seen anybody jump up and run as fast as that guy did. That was really funny.
Yes, yes. So we were upstairs. It was he and I. If this is the clip you're talking about, we were upstairs in the third floor. The third floor is our maximum security level, and in one of the cells, it was our women's cell, so it's a little bit more open, kind of dorm style cell, if that makes sense. And now footsteps are something that are extremely common here on the back stairs, on all three levels. You'll hear footsteps. And so we had told him that this is common and you may hear this. And, some people, when they come in and you tell them this stuff, they like, oh, okay, whatever. And so he was kind of one of those that was on the fence. And so we were sitting there, and it was just he and I. And these footsteps just ran up the stairs, and poor guy, he was he was really kind of taken with that, and wasn't really sure what to do. And it's like, just it's okay. This is what happens. It's all right here. No worries.
Yeah. Yeah, his reaction was I loved it.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys get the shadow,
Mhm.
you get footsteps, and
Yes.
then I saw there was some EVPs too that's usually in the drunk tank, right? That's where
Yep. Yep. Our drunk tanks are behind this wall that's behind me. Our drunk tanks are right behind there. We've got two of them. Now, we do know that at least one suicide did happen, in one of our drunk tanks. And so it is not uncommon to go into the drunk tanks and hear either moaning or different EVPs. Um, Whistling seems to be very interesting here as well. We were talking to one of the former jailers, and he said that there were times when they wouldn't allow the inmates to talk, and whistling was how they communicated. And
Oh.
in fact, just yesterday, I had a couple in here, and they were just taking a day tour, and I was in the room behind me, just telling them about the drunk tank, and something whistled, a loud whistle, and I said, "Y'all heard that, right?" They're like, "Yes." And I said, "Okay, that happens a lot." And she's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm getting chills." So yeah, whistling, EVPs, footsteps, doors opening and shutting. It really does run the gambit here.
Wow. So do you feel like now that you guys have been in there, is it 2 or 3 years?
Since the fall of 2021. Yep.
Okay. So do you feel like the activity, because now there's been a lot of people who have come through and investigated, because you have, is it nightly people can rent
Mhm.
it?
Yep. Yep.
So do you feel like that having all the different people come through now, that it's changed like the energy? Do you feel like it's become more haunted?
I do. So the way that Miranda and I conduct our paranormal business here is every time we have either a tour or a paranormal investigation team come in, we will go upstairs and we will sit and talk to our spirits, and we will say, "Okay, here's the group that's coming in tonight. There's going to be this many people. They're going to be asking you questions. Thank you for communicating with them. You can't hurt them in any way, but definitely let them know that you're here." And so we just have a conversation with them, and I think they have become extremely familiar with both Miranda and myself. I think they tend to like her a little bit more because she's from Tennessee and they're probably all related. So we tend to get responses when we have that conversational dialogue with them. And so I think because of that, our teams have really been fortunate to get something here. I think I can count maybe on one hand the number of teams who have left and felt that they got nothing. Generally, those are teams that are larger, 8, 10, 12.
Yeah.
We have now limited it to you can only bring 8 team members because we are a smaller location. So most teams leave with an EVP, with footsteps, with a whistle, being touched. I do think the activity has ramped up, but I think it's because we're so accommodating to it, if that makes sense.
It does. And it's funny that you say that, because while you were saying that, it reminded me, I recently did a dream experiment with anime.
Mhm.
And the first thing I did was I sat down with her,
Yeah.
whether there's something there or not. I sat down with her and I told her everything that was going to happen, that people were going to be trying to contact her through dreams. And she was allowed not to hurt. I did the same thing. Don't hurt
Mhm.
anybody, but go ahead and communicate with them. Let them know what you want or what they should know. And I had some really amazing results. So I think that that's probably the one thing that other locations could be missing, is that they're
Mhm.
not taking the time to sit down with the spirits and say, this is, because you would want to know, right?
Mhm.
Who's going to be here? Am I supposed to be talking to them? Or, I mean, how do you know? I
Right.
love that.
Yeah, and I think it may be obviously our location is a little bit smaller than say Harriman Hospital or Old South Pitt or Trans Allegheny or something like that. So it may not be as easy to do that, but for us, we just feel it's necessary, right? Essentially, the spirits are part of our team. We're part of their team, and
Yeah.
we're all trying to preserve this building. And
Yeah.
I think that they are receptive to that. And so when we're talking to them one on one, they tend to very much respond to that.
Yeah. So then I have to ask, because I mean, I know you're used to being in there. So it's like sometimes, even though a place is haunted and you're used to it, even if there's activity, you don't become scared because it's kind of like second nature, right?
Mhm.
But if if you're left alone there and something, someone's running down the stairs, like, do you have that first like fear reaction? Like, what is your reaction when something goes on and you're alone?
Oh yeah, no, it definitely is one of those like, okay, that just happened. This is probably, I don't know, 8 or 9 months ago. I was opening upstairs, and my very first thing I have to do in the morning is have coffee. If I don't have coffee, I'm non-existent. And
Yeah.
so I had made my coffee and I'd gone upstairs and I was opening the turning on all the lights and everything, open the cells. And I was up on the 3rd floor and I said, "Good morning. Anybody want a cup of coffee?" And this man said, "I do." And he was literally he could have been within 4 feet of me. I said,
Wow.
"Okay." I set my cup of coffee down. I said, "All right, you can have that. I'm gonna go downstairs." And so I left it up there for the afternoon. And but it was one of those things, it's like, "Okay, that just happened. I just heard that. I think I'm gonna go downstairs now for a minute, just try to collect myself." Because
Yeah.
you know things are going to happen here. It's just a matter of when, right?
Yeah.
Every time I ask a question, I don't get an audible response. But, when you ask question number 5 or number 6 and you get that audible response, it's like, okay, yeah, I just heard that. Like
Yeah.
yesterday when we heard the whistle, I was just talking to these guests like I'm talking to you, and this really loud whistle just went up above us, and they're like, yeah, we definitely heard that. So you expect things to happen, but to your point, it's still a little bit startling when it does, when it's a direct
Yeah.
response.
Yeah, yeah, that's really cool. Now, the rugby, that's something that you guys are doing tours with
Mhm,
too, right? So what is that
correct.
all about?
So Rugby is about 20 minutes from here, and it was a utopian village that was built in 1880. It was built by a gentleman by the name of Thomas Hughes. He was a very prolific author from England, and his dream was to help what he called the second sons of England. So these are the second born sons of a family who did not get all of the titles and the riches that the first son would, right? Essentially, they're the
Huh.
spare. And
Yeah,
so his dream was to come over to America and form a village where these second sons could come over and work and live and thrive in a utopian society that everybody contributed to. So it was built in 1880. So they had, during its heyday, they had probably about 500 to 550 residents there.
wow.
They had 68 buildings, houses, churches, a school, the Thomas Hughes Library, which is fascinating. And so then through a series of unfortunate events, it really went into decline in 1887, 1888. And it essentially became a ghost town up until
Oh,
the 1950s and 60s when some residents decided we need to go ahead and save this and preserve this. So in the 1970s, it was actually put on the National Register of Historic Places. So long story short, they've got about 14 of the original 68 structures still standing. So it is open as what they call a living museum, and so you can take day tours and go into these buildings and see the architecture and the artifacts that they have there. And then at night we lead lantern tours. We also lead guided ghost hunts, and then we lead the paranormal investigations. So basically, we run all of their after dark programs.
wow. Okay, so then you guys have been doing, because I know I watched a live with Miranda
Hmm.
doing the rugby,
Hmm.
but so have you, and it seemed like it was really active, and there's even like an elemental and stuff. So what have you guys kind of experienced on your tours?
Oh, it is extremely active. So like I said, we take the tour around the village, and then we get access to 5 of the original structures. So they give us the key, we can take the guests in. And so we allow them to carry K2 meters with them. So there's several of the structures where we go in and the K2s just start going crazy. The schoolhouse is extremely active. We've gone in, and because it's a two-story structure, you can hear footsteps running up on the second floor, or you'll hear doors shutting up on the second floor. There's one instance where I was just giving a lantern tour, and there were 8 people on this tour. So when you walk into the schoolhouse on the first floor, it's kind of a long room, and there's chairs in the back section. So I had all the guests sit in the chairs, and I'm talking about the history of the building, talking about the stories and the paranormal that's associated with the building. And we had some of the K2s, and some of the K2s were going off and in response to some of the questions I was asking. And then I asked the question, do you like when I bring my friends here? And this little girl said, yes, I do.
Oh,
And so the gentleman closest to that disembodied voice got up and pretty much levitated. And he's like, it's right here, it's right here, it's right here. I said, yeah, I know, it's right there. We all heard it. So disembodied voices, footsteps, K2 activity, the tripwire does really well there. We also get some intelligent responses off of that, and it's just a great location. Again, it's one of those locations where the history, for lack of a better term, really comes to life because I do think that these are entities or spirits or energies that had an association with the village. They're very connected to it, whether it be the houses or some of the items that are in the houses. I mean, these are items that are, from the 1870s, 1860s that came over with these families from England. So there's a lot of historical archives and artifacts that are in this village, and it's just a great location to be at, just for the historical perspective,
Yeah.
and then for the paranormal as well. But I mean, just to take a history tour through this village is incredible.
Yeah, yeah, because before you guys had talked about that, I never even knew there were like I had never heard any kind of story like that. And then it
Mhm.
seems like utopian villages come up a lot. And I didn't even know they went back because I was thinking of that's more like a 1960s, Jetsons kind of idea where the people trying to like make this modern living and it like so now that showed me it goes back to like, at least to the 1800s,
Mhm.
probably, more.
Yeah.
Um hmm,
Yeah, but it really is, like I said, the tour, like I said, it goes around through the village, and the last building that we go into, and this is on purpose, the last building that we go into is the Thomas Hughes Library. And this library was built in 1882. It was the first lending library in the Southeast United States.
oh,
And because he was such a well-known author, he asked for donations of books to start his library. So 7,000 books were donated to this library. That
huh,
library as it stands right now is exactly the same as 1882. All of the original volumes are there except for 5. Um,
wow.
yeah, the original chairs, the doors, the key that we use to unlock the door is original from 1882. What's really cool is on the inside of the door, there's actually some scratch marks because the first librarian actually took his dog to work with him. And so those are from 1882, right? And so
Wow.
it's just it's stepping back into that history and having that
Mhm.
very tangible and tactile experience with this historic location. I love it. I love everything about it. I love being associated with it. I love doing the tours. Every time I go over there, it's just like you're stepping back in time.
Yeah. Now, with these different locations that you're closely working with, do you like always end up discovering new history, like as you're going along, like things just start, either people bring it to you or you do a little more digging, like do you keep finding more and more history?
Mhm. Oh, yeah, absolutely. It is something both Miranda and I are very passionate about. We could just go through and tell you the superficial stories of the
Yeah.
jail and of Rugby, but to us, history is so much more than that, right? And so we find these unique characters, we find these unique personalities that we can grow these stories off of, and that's what we love to tell, right? So when we go through Rugby, we talk about Thomas Hughes, we talk about his mother, who was 87 when she came over from England to help her
Huh.
son in 1882, right? We talk about some of the people who died there and why they died, but how their connection with Rugby was so important. Same thing here with the jail. We talk about some of the obvious, like Richard Ellis, who was killed in 1925, but we also talk about some of the stories that aren't so prevalent that most people don't know about. And what I love is when people come to our tours, either at the jail or Rugby, or they watch one of our Soul Sisters videos, and they tell us we never knew that. We have been here, we've taken tours, or we have been to that location, but I never knew that about the history. And
Huh.
that to me is awesome. In fact, we had currently in Rugby, there are about 60 residents who live there that live in the village full time. And
Oh, wow.
so when a few months ago, they all decided that they wanted to take the lantern tour to kind of hear how we do it and what we do, right? And so they all came on the tour, and at the end of it, they said it was fascinating that they learned so much that they didn't know, and they lived there, right? That we
Yeah.
delved into such different historical narratives and historical details that they just didn't really know about or think about. And so that's what we really love to do, is bring the history to life and then couple that with the paranormal stories.
Yeah, I feel like it does because whenever I go to a place and it's like you find out like who lived there, especially if you can see like a photo of them and like they're like this is their chair. Or my big thing is I like to stand in windows and look out and know like this is where this person stood and they looked out this window, and I wonder what were they thinking about, what did they see? And if you stand there long enough and do that, you start to kind of feel the emotions or whatever it is, and that's my favorite thing to do.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And it's fascinating. There's one of the houses there in Rugby that we can go into is the Uffington House. And this is where Madam Hughes, Thomas Hughes' mother, this is where she lived. And she lived with her granddaughter, Emily, who is Thomas Hughes's niece. And Emily loved everything about Rugby. So she brought different plants over. So she planted all these different plants and trees and fruit trees and vines and all of that other stuff that she brought over with her. And those are still there, right? So you can stand in the window and you can see what she planted and some of the
Yeah.
trees that she planted. And, to look at some of the historical photos and then couple that with what we see today, to your point, it's really fascinating to say, did she know that this many years removed, this tree was going to be this tall, or
Yeah.
this hedgerow would be so prolific, right? Or growing so grandly here in front of this house. And it's really interesting to try to step back into that time frame and put yourself in that scenario, and then couple that with what you see today.
Yeah. So do you feel like, and I pretty much already know what your answer is, but do you feel like talking about the history definitely, when you're talking about like in a positive, like, teaching way, that it does bring about more interaction with the spirit world?
Oh, absolutely. The thing I like to say is nobody likes to go through life now being unnoticed, right? Nobody wants to go through life thinking they're invisible. And I think it's the same thing with spirits, right? They want to be recognized. They want to know that their name is still being uttered, that they're still being talked about. And I think, especially with Rugby, I think they're proud of what they built and that it's still standing, right? Again, we're talking about a building from 1882
Yeah.
that's still there and that people built, that they rallied around. The church built in 1887. Everything about it, even the paint inside this church, is original from 1887. And I think when you talk about that in a positive light, which is the only way you should be talking about it, by the way,
Yeah.
when you talk about it in this positive light, I think it's like they're saying, yes, we understand that you're talking about us and we're proud of what we have here, and how we got here, and that it's still standing.
Yeah. So what about like locations that have like, and I won't mention any, but there's ones out there that are popular where there's been horrific murders.
Mhm.
And so that people are constantly coming in and either reenacting the murders or talking about the murders, or it's all about the bad thing that happened that makes it famous for, the horrible thing. What do you think that that could do like to the spirits or the building itself?
Well, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm sitting in a jail right now, right? Typically, you're not going to have a happy experience in a jail or a prison or, an
True.
insane asylum or a mental
Yeah.
institution, right?
Yeah.
Those aren't places that are designed for happy. And so,
Right.
but I guess when I said you need to talk about it in a positive light, I think what I probably should have said is non-disparaging. And I think there's a little bit of a difference. We can talk about the murders here. We can talk about the suicides here. We can talk about the fact that there tended to be some inmate on inmate violence or jailer on inmate violence that did occur here, right? We're in a jail. I think you can talk about that. But when you start talking about a negative impact on it, I think that in my experience, then the spirits aren't as receptive, right? Because they don't want to be associated with that anymore. I mean, Richard Ellis, yes, he was killed right outside the front door in 1925. He doesn't want to be known for that, right? That's not. He wants
Right.
to be known that he was a Baptist preacher. He wants to be known that he was trying to help clean up Scott County, and get rid of moonshiners, right? So we talk about all of those things, and unfortunately, he had a horrible ending, right? He had a
Right.
unsolved murder. Same thing with some of the deputies who've been killed in the line of duty here. We talk about, yes, that's a tragic event that ended his life, but he was so much more than that. And I
Yeah.
think that's what you need to do in these locations, right? Go to the Lizzie Borden house, right? Lizzie Borden house, a lot of activity. It's known specifically for that one event, as it should be,
Right.
right? I mean, that is what happened in that house. But
Yeah.
aside from that, you got to take the narrative further. And so what we did is, yeah, Lizzie Borden was acquitted of the murder, okay, let's take that further. How did she live the rest of her life, right?
Yeah.
She never left Fall River, which to me is amazing. She
Yeah.
gave all of her money to the Animal Rescue League of Fall River, so she's got some altruistic nature there.
Yeah.
What happened to the rest of her? You got to continue the story and bring it full circle to tell the entire story, not just stop at Lizzie Borden. We think she killed her dad and her stepmom, right?
Right.
I think you've got to tell the story in its entirety.
Right. Yeah. Because then what did she do afterwards kind
Mhm.
of could tell you one way or another. Was she doing that out of guilt, or was she actually really was innocent? I don't think
Mhm.
I could have stayed in the town personally, but maybe I kind of love that she did, because if
Mhm.
she was innocent and she stayed there, she was like, I'm confident in the fact that I know I didn't do this, and I'm
Mhm.
going to stay because this is my community. So I
Mhm.
I love that, because I mean it's already hard, I feel like, for women in that time anyways.
Right.
And then if you're convicted, or not convicted, but accused of something horrific,
Right.
and I'm sure she wouldn't want to be remembered for that.
Right, exactly. And so when we do our investigations, those are the type of things that we like to do when we go into the investigations, right? We like to talk to them like they were people. Again, could be awful, right? Could have been awful people in life. I mean, we've spent the night in Brushy Mountain. We've gone to West Virginia State Penitentiary. Horrible people, but you want to talk to them like they were human at some point and understand that. Yeah, we understand what you did was horrific, but we want to talk to you and get your side of the story essentially. And I think
Yeah.
because we do that, we get some interesting results more so than people who go in with bravado and chest thumping and saying this place is demonic or this place is nothing but pure evil. In my experience, we've been to over 3 dozen of the most reportedly haunted places in the US. I've never once witnessed anything evil. I've never once witnessed anything demonic or harmful in us in any way. That's just not what we've experienced, and that kind of leads me to believe that the sensationalism is so rampant right now in what we
Yeah.
do, that it's a little bit discouraging.
Yeah, it is. That's true. I mean, myself, I've been to not as many places as you guys have, but I've been to quite a few, and it's
Mhm.
kind of a variety of types of places. And I've had experiences, uh, but I would never say anything was truly negative.
Mhm.
Sometimes they were a little unsettling, kind of like in a not a fun way, but I would never be like, oh, this is somebody's after me and this is horrible and I'm going to blame everything that happened afterwards. Yeah.
Right.
So then that kind of like makes me wonder. So you guys have been to a lot of locations, and you have those up on your Soul Sisters
Mhm. Soul
YouTube
Sisters
channel.
Paranormal. Yep.
Okay. And then, so now you're doing these surveys where
Right.
you're asking investigators, about. So I want to hear a little bit. I'll let you talk about it.
So my background is in research. For some reason, I'm one of those geeky people that love to look at data and trends and stuff like that. And so when Miranda and I opened the jail, what we found was we had this building that closed in 2008. It said vacant till 2000, really till 2001 when we opened the museum, right? So what was this building doing from 2008 to 2021? It was costing taxpayer money. The heat, the water, the electricity, all of that had to be kept on, right?
Yeah.
It Property taxes were on this building as well. And so when we came in, what did we do? Right? We took the burden off the taxpayer. We pay all the utilities, we pay all of the electric bill, the sewer, and all that. We give the town a rent every month. So now the town is actually making money off of what we
Yeah.
do. And so when you look at After Dark or paranormal tourism, right now that's a $30 billion a year industry, right? And why aren't museums who are self-admittedly struggling to get people through the door, why aren't they looking at this as a revenue source, right? Why do buildings have to sit vacant at night when it's still costing you money to run? Like, for example, this building still costs money at night, right?
Yeah.
Why can't it make us money at night? And so why aren't other museums taking advantage of this? And I haven't run the numbers yet because I'm still in the middle of the survey, because what I'm doing is I'm actually surveying paranormal investigators because I want to see what revenue they are spending, right? A majority of us are spending over $1,000 a year to go to these
Oh,
locations, right?
yeah.
And then I want to look at why aren't museums and historic locations taking advantage of this? Right now, just through a cursory look, it's because of that negative attitude, right? It's because they don't want the stigma of being known as a quote unquote haunted location or someplace where YouTubers or TikTokers can come in and run amok, right? They don't want that.
Yeah.
But I say you can spin the narrative to where you control the information that's getting out there. So, for example, like this jail, right? How Miranda and I conduct business is if you're a paranormal team that comes in here, you have to take a history tour, right? It's a very brief tour. We tell you
Yeah.
the history. You have to take it if you're doing any type of video release. And the next thing, you cannot say that there's demons or evil spirits here. It is not true, right? They are not here. We can tell you that they're not. If you say otherwise, then we're going to come after you legally. And so by doing that, we don't want to seem like we're being bitchy. We're controlling the narrative, right?
Yeah.
Because if it gets out that somebody comes out of here screaming and running, that there's demons everywhere, that affects everything. That affects the community, that affects us, that affects
Yeah.
the jail, that affects the paranormal community as a whole. And because
Yeah.
we know it is not here, saying so is very disingenuous to who we are. So, and that's what I want to try to get across. It's like, you can be a location, you can be a historical location, you can be a historical museum, and embrace this community, if you will, take advantage of the money that we're offering, and we can help you with your revenue stream.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm doing with the survey. I'll be presenting all of this data at the Tennessee Association of Museums annual conference in March. I've interviewed, or I have about 125 responses so far from paranormal
Wow.
investigators and about 160 so far from museums across the country.
Oh, wow. That
Hmm.
is so cool. And it's true because I noticed like where I'm at in California, we have the Whaley House. That's like
Hmm.
the one everybody knows. And they started off, it was just like the normal like tour, right?
Hmm.
Just a history tour. Then they started doing ghost tours where they would take you around. Same thing. They're just telling you about it, but nothing else is happening. And then I noticed now they're doing actual paranormal investigation, but they're running the investigation. So
Yeah.
a team doesn't come in. I mean, I guess some can, like if you're on TV and stuff, but the way they have it is that you go with them, the people who work there or the docents, and then they lead the investigation, but they freely let you, investigate, and they have equipment and stuff. I haven't done it yet, but that's definitely on my list. I want to like
Hmm.
stay down there and do the whole thing because that's actually a really cool location. I feel like getting to do something like that, it it makes you more interested because like if you go and you do a paranormal investigation, even if people really aren't that much into the paranormal, when I share that I've been to a location, I give them a little bit about experiences, it makes them want to go,
Yeah.
even if they just go for a day tour. I have some friends and I told them about it, and two different friends have gone there just to take the day tour just so they could kind of get a feeling of what it was like and see for themselves. So
Hmm.
just letting people come in and do that kind of thing, I feel like they share it with their friends. Hey, guess what I did? This was really cool. So it doesn't even have to be like full paranormal teams. It could even be like people, paying for an investigation.
Well, right, exactly. I mean, and it doesn't even have to be anything related to the paranormal. If you were to come to this jail during the day, right, and take a tour, and then you come back at night and take a tour, it's a completely different experience when the lights are off, right?
Yeah.
Your sound, your hearing is heightened, right? Your emotions are different than seeing it in the daylight, right? Because you're seeing it through flashlights. Same thing
Yeah.
with rugby, right? You can see rugby in the day; it's beautiful, it's historic, but you go there at night with a lantern, it's a completely different
Yeah.
experience. And so, and that's what that's what I'm going to say in my presentation is it doesn't have to be about ghosts or paranormal if you don't believe in that or you don't want that stigma. Just let people see in a different light, because what's the problem with museums, right? You go to a museum, you've seen it, right? Unless they put on a special exhibit or something, more than likely you're probably not going to go back.
Right.
Very few. I mean, some people may get a year membership or an annual membership, but most of the time you don't get a lot of repeat business unless you're doing something special, right? So how do we
Yeah.
tap into that, right? You've got to change the narrative a little bit and say, okay, we're offering this something special for you. Come and see it take a history tour during the night. Especially like since the pandemic, people want experience tourism, right? They want different experiences. They want heritage tourism.
Yeah.
And even though my feelings on extreme TikTokers and YouTubers, they've shown that the paranormal is a big deal,
Yeah.
and people are willing to pay money to have a small group go through a location with a flashlight. And I think museums and historic locations can take advantage of this, because right now they're hemorrhaging. I was on a phone call because I'm doing one-on-one interviews with different museums and historical societies as well. I was on a phone interview with one last week, right? And he said, I've been sitting here all day and not one person has come in.
Wow.
We had only a handful of people come in last week. And so he wanted to talk to me about what we do here at the jail and how we do it. And I
Yeah.
said, you can take advantage of this, right? You can implement some of these programs and practices. You're controlling the narrative. You're controlling what's being, how your programs are
Yeah.
established and run, and you will make money, right? Like I said, the USS North Carolina. The USS North Carolina is the World War II memorial for for the state of North Carolina. They have
Yeah.
embraced paranormal 110%. And you go in there, you can do an investigation. They welcome teams to come in because last year they made a large amount of money off paranormal investigations. And
Yeah.
so again, those are the things that we're going to be looking at during my presentation. And this is what the data is going to show. And I'm really excited about it.
I am too. I'm so glad you're doing this because, one, as a consumer, it opens so many more doors to go in and explore that kind of nighttime aspect of, what's going on. And then I'm excited for the museums because the worst thing I can see, I live in a town close to Temecula, and they're tearing down the old buildings and replacing it with modern, new builds that are supposed to look like they're old, which I hate. They're
That's
destroying it.
silly. Yeah.
And it's because they're not, making any money the way it stands. And
Hmm.
it's sad because, I mean, America's already so new anyways.
Right.
I mean, if you look at
Relatively
Europe, they're not
speaking. Yeah.
tearing their stuff down.
Mm-mm.
Why are
No.
we?
No, and they've embraced the paranormal, right? Come
Yeah.
and see our spooky ghost stories, or they talk about it on even their day tours. You can take day tours, and
Yes.
they talk about it. So, for me, and that's kind of what we're seeing with this jailhouse series that we're doing with the Jailhouse Informant podcast here from the jail. We're talking to these different jails, and when we're seeing that they are making revenue from these after dark tours. Again, it doesn't have to be paranormal investigators. If you don't want to make the leap from nothing to paranormal investigators, I get it. I can
Yeah.
totally understand your apprehension about doing that. But baby steps, right? Start with a historical nighttime tour with flashlights and see what your
Yeah.
response is. Kick that up to a guided ghost hunt, right? See what your response is, and then grow those programs from there. And again, that's what I'm really trying to help people understand, because recidivism going into these museums is very low. Some of the data that I've seen so far from the things coming in, there's a decrease in people visiting these museums right now because they want something different. I mean, we talked about it at the beginning of the show that our generation, we love history, but those behind us, they want a different type of experience if they're going to go into these
Yeah.
locations.
Yeah. Yeah. They're looking, just, it's all about the technology and
Mhm.
seeing things that aren't even really there.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and I was actually speaking to the director of the USS North Carolina again last week when I was interviewing her for my presentation, and she put it very, very interesting. She said, when guests come to a museum or a location, they already have how they want to experience it, right? So if they want to go into a location and look at historic furniture, right, that's what they're going to gravitate towards. If they want to go
Yeah.
in and look at historic photograph, that's where they're going to gravitate towards. If they want to go in and look for paranormal, that's what they're going to gravitate towards. And so why not give them that opportunity to do it? And I
Yeah.
thought that was very insightful, because she's absolutely right.
Yeah. Oh, and she is, because anytime I go into a historical building, whether they realize it or not, I'm taking pictures, but
Mhm.
I have a different motive. I'm
Yeah.
just seeing if I capture something, because you just don't know.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. One of the questions that I have on the survey for museums is, do your guests ask if your location is haunted? 97% have said yes.
Yeah.
That they've asked if it's haunted, but yet I've only got, about 36% that do any type of after dark activity. You know your guests are wanting this. Why
Yeah.
aren't you giving it to them to at least get the money from them?
Yeah.
So again, to me, it's fascinating, and just to be able to see these numbers and then looking at it from the paranormal investigator side, it's the fact that we drive to these locations. We're very much interested in the history. We're very much interested in supporting these locations. So that's what we're putting our money towards. And a majority of the investigators were at that age where we have that expendable income, we have the ability to travel, and that's what we're putting our money towards. And it's not just the location that's benefiting, right? It's everything that's outside of that: the hotels, the restaurants, the gas stations, the other historic locations, the museums, the
Yeah.
historical societies. All of those things are benefiting, and so that's what I'm trying to convey with what I'm doing.
Yeah. Oh, I do. I always find the antique shop.
Mhm.
Got to go out to eat, whether
Right,
it's lunch or
exactly.
dinner.
Yep, yep.
You're gonna want a place to stay. So, and for me, especially if it's some little small town that I'm not familiar with, I'm wanting everything to be, the hotels right there close, and I'm gonna eat at the restaurant, because you kind of want to absorb that whole community, right?
Mhm.
And kind of
And
like see what the locals are like. Because I'm a people watcher too, so I like to speak with the past, but also with like the present and what's
Mhm.
going on now. And like you hope to get little stories from people. And even like running into, I stayed at the Cosmopolitan Hotel in California, and we were at the bar getting drinks, and there was another couple there getting drinks, and I don't know if they saw my key or what was going on, but the conversation came up, and we were staying in one of the haunted rooms and they were staying in the other one. And so we got into a full conversation about that, and
Mhm.
it was just a cool thing. And then we were able to share other experiences we had and other locations we went to. Like it really is a word of mouth kind of thing, you know?
Absolutely. I mean, we had a team come in, and they had eaten at the restaurant, one of the restaurants here, before their investigation, and they ended up running into one of the former deputies that used to work here at the jail. So the guy was like, "What are you in town for?" So they were talking, and he was telling them all these stories. So they had some really interesting stories when they came. And to your point, that's what's so cool about these small local community buildings, that are open for a museum, but then also take that out for the paranormal, because there's so much that can be generated from just this community, this subset of people who are willing to go out and pay money to be in these locations and have a different experience in them.
Yeah. Okay, so I have one last question for
Sure.
you. So the house that I live in, it's only from the 1980s, so you would think it'd be pretty easy to know who lived here and stuff. Um, but I don't know where to get started. Like, how do I find out the history of my home? Like, how do I even find like a photo? Because it's like what do they call that? Cookie cutter homes. It's like a community housing development, and
Mhm.
so there should be like some photo. Like, my dream is that I can find the photo of like them breaking ground, or them, you know what I mean? Like all the
Yeah.
different photos. And this is probably one of the least interesting communities we have. Like
Oh,
the original communities, like the Del Webb 1960s. So everybody
oh
kind of
yeah.
gravitates towards that.
Yes.
But this one is just like an interesting, we're right up against the hill. And so I think about the Native American aspect as well, because you go hiking up in there and there's one side of the hill that you just feel like the spirits in the wind kind of thing.
That's cool.
It's a really energetic place. That's what the side the coyotes always tend to be at too. So there's something about that section, and it's funny because they just started building houses on the hill, but on the other side. And the whole time I crossed my fingers. I'm like, I hope they find artifacts. But then I thought, even if they do, will they say they have? Because that would really stop construction, you know.
Right?
So,
Yep.
like, as just somebody who doesn't do this normally, how would I kind of find, where would I start? Where do I look to get this kind of stuff?
The first thing that I would do is go to the property assessor's office or the property appraiser, whatever it's called out there in Tennessee or in California. Here it's the property assessor. I know in Florida it's the property appraiser. And just get some information on your property and see what kind of records they have, either for just your house or the neighborhood itself. You can get plat records and all of that. The historical society could have some information on that when you go and look up different areas, see if they have information on the subdivision. The person who built the subdivision, right? You may go to newspapers.com and type in the name of the subdivision. So they may have articles about, hey, this subdivision's breaking ground 1980 or whatever. They may have pictures of them breaking ground. Newspapers.com is a good one for that. Just type in just start typing in your address in Google and see where that takes you, because you can find some interesting things from there too.
I've got nothing by doing that so far.
Yeah, try newspapers.com. Again, I would start big, start with the subdivision and the developer, the name of the developer, and see if you can kind of whittle it down, because most of the time you'll have, if it's slated to be a pretty big subdivision, you'll have a newspaper or something saying, hey, this 50 house or 100 house subdivision is breaking ground. That would be an interesting place to start.
Yeah, because it's just one of those weird little things, and I know that there's something to it.
Mm-hmm.
And the last person who would know, who lived here, he lived on the corner house, and apparently he bought it new. Mm-hmm. But by the time I got interested in this, he'd already passed away. So I kick myself for that, because he literally bought it new, and I don't even know who the developer was. So I'm really starting at zero.
Ground zero. Yeah. So typically the property assessor's office will have the lineage of ownership.
Oh, okay.
So you can tell who owned the house before you or who owned the property before you. So you should be able to follow that down. The clerk of court could have some records dating back to that. Somebody has a record of the subdivision being built. Nobody
makes sense.
Yeah, nobody's going to go buy a 100 plot subdivision and not have information on it. Zoning office would have stuff, because you'd have to have it zoned for that subdivision. So you may get some historical records from the zoning office. There's different avenues, but you just got to find one and try to whittle your way down.
Yeah. And then, so it's the same thing when you're going on an investigation, say you're somebody who, knows a little bit about the location, and maybe you take the historical tour and get some information that way. But what if somebody wanted to dig deeper? Do they actually talk to maybe the people who are running the location and say, hey, I want to dig a little deeper?
Oh, absolutely.
Or right? That'd probably be the best.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, go in, talk to the Dosens, take them out to coffee. I mean, there's been times when we say, hey, can we take you out to dinner so we can talk about your location? We've done that several times on some of the locations that we've gone to. Or can we take you out to coffee? Love to get some more stories from you. Talk to the Dosens, talk to the people who actually own or manage the location, right? You can get some more information from them sometimes than you can from the Dosens, even though the boots on the ground people are the best way to do it. For me, newspapers.com, for me, is a wealth of information. There's another newspaper site out there that has some different articles, but the name escapes me right now. I have a subscription to newspapers.com. So I get a lot of information from that. If you Google the state archives, so for example, California State Archives, a lot of information on some of the locations will be found there. So for example, if you go to the Tennessee State Archives and you Google the Scott County Jail, you get a lot of different records, you get a lot of different photographs. So the state archives for us is a really good source of information. The historical societies in the area, every time we go to a location, we try to at least hit one historical society or a historical location that would have more information on it. So yeah, you just kind of, find those avenues and really talking to the people first and then moving out from there can get you a lot of information.
Yeah. Okay. That's really good, solid advice, because I do know that when you go to places, the docents usually are happy when people are asking for more information instead of just walking past them like they're not there.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, that's, and usually they're volunteers too.
Hmm.
Like
Yes.
99% of the time, Dosens are volunteers, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. In fact, the funny thing about the survey that I'm doing right now is a majority of the places that are answering only have 1 to 5 paid employees, but yet but then on the flip side, they have 40 to 50 volunteers. That's the
Oh,
majority of numbers that have volunteers. So to your point, yes, most of these people are volunteers. You know, hate to be ageist, but most of them are older. They're retired. They do this because they love the location or they love the history of the location. So just speaking to them, they would love to tell you all about it. They are proud of their locations. They are proud of what they're doing. They're proud to tell you the history, and to let people know what's going on in that location. So like I said, there's been numerous times we'll just sit and talk to them. I'll ask if I can record them, and most don't have a problem with that. And then, hey, can we take you out to coffee? I'd love to talk to you some more about it. We've done that several times. Or do you want to come out to dinner with us because before our investigation, because we'd love to talk to you some more about it. And they're very receptive to that.
oh, I love that. I never even thought about asking them, can I record this? Because
Mhm.
people could tell me stuff, and 5 minutes later, I'll like ask my husband. I'll be like, "What did they say?" And
Mhm.
neither
Yeah.
one of us can remember, and it's like it's hard to like take a notepad and write stuff down.
Right.
I'm going to
Right.
try that next time I hit one of these spots and say, can I record,
Mhm.
what you're saying about the history, because I would like to include it in whatever
Mhm.
I'm, doing with this.
Right. Now,
Oh,
some
I
now
love
now, I mean, don't feel upset if they reject that offer.
right.
There are some times where if you're taking an actual tour, they don't want the script out there. Like we don't let
Sure.
when we take a tour, a flashlight tour, you can't record it.
Yeah.
But we can sit and talk to you about the jail. We'll
After.
talk to you about stories and stuff like that. And so, most people when they're kind of talking off the cuff, they're fine with you recording it just as long as you're not recording their scripted tour.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, and they, like I said, just can I sit down, talk with you? I'd love to ask you some different questions. Most people are extremely receptive to that.
Cool. Okay, so is there anything else that you wanted to share that I missed? Because I kind of jumped all over the place.
No, I love speaking with you, Dee Dee. I really appreciate your enthusiasm for all of this. And so I just really appreciate you having me on tonight. So I apologize in advance if she
Oh,
starts running around.
oh, I love that.
She's
She's
a
welcome.
mess.
I love Sally.
Okay, good.
She's
Because
your
she's
little
in.
fashion model.
She really is. We really lucked out. I never dreamed that she would allow me to put the hats and stuff on her.
Yeah.
But yeah, she gives me about 30 to 45 seconds for each one, and I can take as
Oh,
many pictures as I want. And then after that, she's like, "I'm done." So, but
yeah.
she's really good about it.
Oh my God. I feel like she just like showed up out of nowhere, right?
Yeah, yeah, we're
It's
Miranda was given a tour one night and she jumped up on the window here and just started meowing. And so after the tour, Miranda brought her in and then the next day we had a conversation with her that said, if you're cool with our guests and you're cool with our spirits and the spirits are cool with you, you can stay. And boy, she has embraced it. She loves it here.
yeah, she does. I feel like she's, if you want to go with the whole reincarnation, I'm like, who is she? Where
Mhm.
did, because I just like, she just cats, sometimes they just like manifest out of thin air. And I'm like,
Mhm.
who are they really?
Yeah,
It's
yeah, and
cool.
and she's just so good, and some of our spirits sometimes will interact with her, and she'll interact with them. So she's
Oh.
just really been a great addition. I can't imagine the jail without her now.
Thank you for watching this week's episode. All the links are below, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.